The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Guided Podcast. This week, I have been guided to speak with you all about learning and healing cycles. Now, to give you a little context as we dive deeper into this concept, our healing happens in levels and layers. You can think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion, where each new layer represents a new level of healing. And more specifically, I want you to think about it as a spiral, because our healing really does take on that shape, especially if you can imagine that spiral looking something like a whirlpool, where the spiral is much wider up top and then gets smaller and smaller as your eye makes its way down to the bottom of that whirlpool. So this is what our healing looks like. We heal at one layer, and then Spirit says, great job. Now go deeper. And sometimes we're guided to go deeper with our healing immediately. And sometimes we get a little reprieve before that same concept or wound boomerang backs around to be looked at another level and in another way. So remember that your healing happens in levels and layers. It happens in a spiral. And if you're anything like me, once I heal something, I pretty much want a high five, a that a girl, and I want to be done. Even though I'm well aware this is not how the healing cycle actually works, I wouldn't be honest if I wasn't sharing that when my own healing comes back around to be healed at another level and another layer. I'm usually meeting it with an eye roll coupled with this again. I thought we already healed this. And if I'm being really honest, sometimes it makes me question whether I healed anything at all the last time around, given that it's showing up again, right? I have these thoughts about here we go again. Like, why are we doing this again? I guess I didn't do a good enough job, which just makes me doubt whether I've done what I needed to do with my healing. And that judgment is not the point. Now, my core wound, as I talk about frequently on this podcast, is one of not feeling enough. So you can hear the theme of my core wound, that not enoughness talking there, but I would encourage you to think about your own core wound or whatever deep pattern that may feed or fuel your own eye roll situation about your own healing process. For me, I like to bring things to completion. And so once I move through something and I've healed something, I feel really good about it. But then when it comes back around to be looked at again, that's when that doubt enters my mind and makes me feel like, maybe I didn't do a good enough job healing this the first time around. But the truth is, that's just not how healing works. We do most certainly a good enough job in healing what we need to heal. We're always right where we need to be. And we need to trust that when that circumstance or that situation or that pattern or that wound is coming back around for another look, it's because we are ready to take it deeper. In my last solo episode, From Corporate to Calling, Redefining Success, you might have heard me speak to a deep pattern around how I used to define success and what my new definition of success required of me in terms of my healing. So things like having to adopt new beliefs around being more versus doing more, needing to find more balance in my life, needing to dismantle limiting beliefs around money or other scarcity programs. And to briefly recap, there was a lot of sadness and frustration and grief and anger that needed to be processed repeatedly throughout my journey in order to move through the healing to arrive at the place where I was able to adopt the perspective that I now hold. So much to my surprise, I woke up one morning last week and I felt off in my body. So I knew that that was an indicator that there was some sort of emotion that I needed to process. I could feel the edge or that prickliness within me. And I didn't actually know what it was about, what was causing it. So I decided to do some breath work to process my emotions. And when I took the time to release, all sorts of emotions related to this old pattern around success were coming back up. This old definition of success was actually still live and well within my body. And that's what my body was reacting to because it created emotions that I wasn't fully conscious of. I realized that although my focus and my steadiness in working towards some of my long-term goals has dramatically improved, I realized I was still feeling stressed about how long it was actually going to take me to bring some of these creative projects to life, and in turn, what that meant for my business. And then I immediately felt discouraged. I realized that I had a situation the day prior where I was trying to make a self-honoring decision by removing myself from one environment and placing myself in a different environment so that I could focus on getting work done. But it only resulted in me not protecting my time boundaries within myself in other ways. And so that left me feeling like I'm not where I want to be around healing my boundaries, especially when it comes to prioritizing myself and my needs. Many of these thoughts then continued to spiral because I didn't catch them soon enough. And they turned into stories about feeling behind the 8 ball when it comes to where I want to be in my business. And that subsequently led to more stress, more anxiety, more worry about how I was going to get everything done that I need to get done, that I want to get done. And then I find myself in total overwhelm. And so in totality, it all left me feeling like I was circling the drain with this past pattern that I just released an entire podcast about how I had healed and how I arrived at this new perspective. Now, it is true that I've done a tremendous amount of healing around those issues. And it is also true that it's time to go deeper, that there is a new level and a new layer of healing that is calling for me to look at. So what I want to highlight here is that all of these feelings that resurfaced recently are a function of an old pattern of mine. And it's also true that I healed so much of it, as you will hear in that podcast. But what Spirit was showing me with these emotions that came back up is now I'm healing a new level and a new layer around this same theme. So our perspective in this process is paramount to how we move through it. Are we going to suffer through it, or are we actually going to meet it with openness and curiosity? I did need to process my own feelings about all of these things, but I was able to move through it faster than ever before because I was able to recognize the old programs that were running and realign more quickly with what I know to be true, which is aligned with my new perspective. And in this situation, what I know to be true is that all of my emotions are valid, but none of the stories fueling those emotions were true. So Spirit reassured me that I am right where I need to be, that I'm not behind, that feeling behind is merely a defense of my ego and a defense my ego uses to get me coming and going and drain my energy and stir up all sorts of worry and anxiety within me. So it's my job to bring conscious awareness to that and stop my ego in its tracks before that worry really takes hold. And I also have to say, I was much more easily able to forgive myself this time around for where I didn't feel like I got it right. And I was able to give myself grace for the levels and layers of learning and what kind of attention it takes to truly bring our intentions to life in all ways. So one of the things that I'm learning that feels so important to share is that it's so much more helpful if we accept that learning happens in these spirals. The work is never done. And if we expect it to be done, we're going to be disappointed and frustrated time and time again when these things come back up. As one of my friends likes to say, when we're done, we're dead. So we can actually celebrate that we get to continue to heal as long as we're breathing on this earth plane, because it means we are well and alive and able to engage with our self and the world and our healing. And what Spirit is teaching me is that when we are in these learning cycles, when we loop back around to these places that we've been before, it's often a reminder of what you've experienced in the past. It rekindles the old stomping ground, so to speak. And when we rekindle those memories, it can also reignite the memories of the pain we experienced. For example, I remember my first job out of graduate school. I moved from Virginia to Boston for my first job, and I was in higher education and student affairs at the time. So my first year living there, I was living in an on-campus apartment because I was overseeing residence halls at a university. But my second second year, I decided to switch jobs within the same university, only this time I was working for student activities and I needed to find off-campus housing. And my experience not only finding an apartment that I could actually afford, but the actual process of it, coupled with the place I actually ended up landing in, was full of stress. There were also a number of factors contributing to that stress, especially because I was emotionally at a particular low point in my life at that time. So my memories of living in Boston aren't good ones. My other memories of Boston are laced with feelings of loneliness and depression and feeling tired and stressed and burnt out and unattractive and being in the throes of a binge eating disorder. So I was unhealthy emotionally, mentally, physically, and I was completely disconnected from my spiritual self. There were times I didn't even want to live anymore because I felt it was pointless given how low I felt and the depths of despair that I was in. And these emotions aren't hard for me to remember because they were scary and they were very prominent at the time. And so they, in some ways, feel forever etched in my mind. So fast forward to when I was getting ready to make my big cross-country move. Now, 14 years has passed at this point from the time that I lived in Boston to making this cross-country move. And by this point in time, I had done a lot of personal healing work on myself. And so arguably, I was a completely different person. I was much more emotionally stable and secure. I now had a strong foundation of how to process my emotions and hold myself through whatever life might send my way. And yet I could feel the stress and anxiety and fears about whether this move was just going to recreate what my Boston move had actually felt like. And Spirit was reassuring me regularly during this time period that I was, in fact, a different person with different resources and different skills available to me that would help me to better and more fruitfully navigate this new transition that weren't previously available to me. And all of that was completely true and absolutely helped me navigate this transition much more smoothly than in the past. And the pattern that was needing to be healed within me, within all of this, in both circumstances, was with regard to how I navigate change. So dealing with change, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with unpredictability has been something that I've pushed against as a recovering control freak my whole life. So it's not that I wasn't still triggered or activated in having to navigate these new changes with this cross-country move, but now I could witness how far I had come along my own journey while recognizing there was still more to be healed. And so even today, I know I have made great progress on this front, and there is more to go. These are the levels and the layers. So let me give you another example of how things circle back around. I was recently speaking with a friend of mine, and she said I could share this story on the podcast, and she's done a lot of her own healing work. And she shared with me that recently she had an opportunity to reconnect with an old colleague, someone whom she had done a lot of work with in a previous job in a very close capacity. And after not seeing this person for quite a while, she found herself in this person's presence again. And with both the benefit of time and healing, this time she noticed that when she was with this person, her entire body was shaking while in their presence. And when she told me this story, my immediate reaction was, wow, that's your intuition working. That's your body giving you a clear signal that this is not a safe person to be around. And so while some of us might interpret that shaking or that anxiety as, oh my goodness, what's wrong? It's actually your body working. It's your body giving you a message. And now in the past, this person may have known that her coworker wasn't the safest to be around for various reasons, but she may not have noticed how her body was offering her that information. In fact, sometimes we are so desensitized to what is happening in our body that our body doesn't react at all. And so as this opportunity circled back around for her, not only did she get to recognize and truly know how powerfully her intuition is speaking to her and her recognition of it, she now gets to feel confident that she has healed a pattern within herself enough to know that her body is going to give her the information it needs in each moment to keep her safe in these types of situations moving forward. So it didn't feel good in her body to be in the presence of this person at that time, time, but she also recognized what was happening. She got the message and it felt empowering to her. She felt empowered by her awareness of how her body felt and what messages her body was giving her. And it left her feeling even more confident by how much she has healed and grown over the past few years. So she got to see the fruit of that labor in that moment. So all sorts of patterns are going to circle back around in our lives to help us see both how far we have come and also where we can continue to take our healing to new levels. But like I experienced personally, we need to be careful not to see these learning cycles as an excuse to feel like there's a list of things that we need to fix about ourselves, or to feel like we aren't working hard enough on ourselves, or feeling like we need to blame or punish ourselves because we didn't get the healing right the first time around, or feeling like we aren't making any progress because here it is showing up again, right? We need to accept that things are going to bang back around. And every time they do, we get to bear witness to where we are in relationship to whatever it is that is showing up for us. Perhaps there will be things in your life that have a larger gap, that gap being the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Perhaps you'll notice the fact that your body is not reacting at all to something that would have triggered you deeply in the past. That's growth. It's all important because it's all a feedback loop offering you insight into what within you is calling for more love. So I want to normalize for everyone that our healing is going to happen in these levels and layers. We are going to circle back through our patterns as we heal them many times, going deeper and deeper with the healing each and every single time. It's possible that you're also going to be reminded of the pain associated with the memories of healing things that you've dealt with in the past. And revisiting old patterns does not mean that we haven't healed anything or that we aren't making progress. It's simply an opportunity to see how far we've come with our healing, with another opportunity to take the healing work deeper, to bring deeper levels of peace and prosperity into our lives. It's an opportunity to continue to let go of the denser energies associated with who we once were, thereby creating more space for all the people that we are becoming, to create more space to hold more light within us, to allow that light to shine brighter and brighter. And while we may be reminded of the pain that we once felt or even still have, and it's important for us to process any of those emotions that do arise, but what's important is that whatever we are in the midst of, we be receptive to it. Our resistance to what is what causes so much suffering. So coming full circle back to where I started this podcast, which was with my admission of my own judgment of the healing journey, the this again sentiment. Instead of creating that resistance within yourself like I did, welcome it in. Get curious about what opportunities are being presented for your healing. Why is this showing up right now? What's the opportunity to heal it? What's the opportunity to feel so we can heal? Give yourself the gift of grace as you find your way through the mist and celebrate not only how far you've come, but how far we get to go. When we have access to the conscious awareness and the spiritual tools to facilitate our healing, there are no bounds to the type of life and the type of future that we can create. And the more that we heal our past, the more we get to create different futures. So I'll leave you with that this week, and I'll look forward to chatting with you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.